Audio check. 1 2 1 2. Audio check. Looks like audio's coming through nice and clear. I'm gonna just slightly jack this up just a teeny bit higher. I like to sort of get a little closer to peaking when I get this loud. Just like a hair approaching it. There we are. Alright. Well, just putting out the last of these promos, and we will be good to go. Thank you guys for your patience. I appreciate you. Had some technical issues. Might have technical issues over the course of the stream. Turns out that our the landlord's going to be coming in to do some work today, so it's very possible he might bop in the middle of stream, and if that's the case, stream over early. So, alas, it do be like that sometimes. In fairness, I'm not against it. I rather like having air conditioning, so that's kind of important for me. Alright. Alright, I think I've got pretty much everything squared away. Thank you guys for your inevitably, unbelievable patience. It truly is wonderful. How's everyone out there doing today? Everyone doing alright? Alright, I think we're good. Alright, just putting out all these promos elsewhere. And then finally on the blue sky, and we're all good. Thank you guys again. I appreciate you all. Is this the first inspection since new owners, or specifically to check the AC to get fixed? It's specifically for the AC. We've had, we don't have a new inspection. We already had our one inspection before the new owners got possession, so that's not really our issue. It's just the fact that we live in a bunch of small loft apartments, and we each have an individual, interior AC. And those need repair and replacement, as does the electronic system around it, because the electronics are not that amazing. It's better than, a lot of places. But, this place gets warm. This place gets very warm. Wow. I just noticed how many fucking... Wow, I've never seen autocorrect mess up that many things. It's unbelievable how easy it is for autocorrect to mess up a simple thing. Absolutely spectacular. Okay, there we go. I'm so glad on the one site that I didn't notice, or the one site that I noticed is the site that I can't edit. So that's nice, that at least I caught it there. So apparently the word lexivons is a real word, and going is a real word too, according to my autocorrect. So, yeah, I think it's drunk. I think it's just drunk, is what it is. Because I can't much square that logic. That seems insane to me. Let me just fix this from the neck up. Bam. And then we go up here. And I'm just going to slap this on. Okay, there we go. We're all edited out. Language is corrected. You gotta love it. Okay, without further ado, thank you guys so much for your patience. You're all amazing. I am the last Omnitect, your favorite robot American, and welcome to the next session of OMNI Draws, where I bust out the drawing tablet, open up YouTube, and we doodle stuff together. At this point, the whole channel's pretty much OMNI Draws, so maybe I just might rebrand it at some point. But for now, I'm gonna leave it as the current branding, because I might do like other stuff that isn't drawing on here, just hobby stuff. So keep an eye out, but in the meantime, let's get to it. I hope everyone is doing well today. A huge thank you, as always, leading off with the fact that we are an incredibly small channel. Like, I do mean an incredibly small channel. So any support you can offer is appreciated. Please slap the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment below. You guys know the drill. It's a YouTube algorithm, and it's evil. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. And also a huge thank you, as always, to my amazing patrons, Ampersand, Atlas, and JJ Cray at Tier 1, Necronomus and Souls Rolls at Tier 2, and Mossy the Mighty and Heinrich the Heroic at Tier 3. My amazing patrons are absolutely what allows me to do my stuff, and that includes my TTRPG work, like you're about to see, my webcomics, including Gentry Delonate No Fascist, a Helldivers 2 anti-fascist comic going for over a year now, and my other YouTube projects. So please, go follow me on that site. You don't even need to subscribe in order to see many of the things, including the full catalog by webcomics for free. But, in the meantime, I thank all of you guys. You mean the world. And, like I said, don't want to waste your time, so let's just jump right into it. We're going to do the face cam. Hey, look at that. Face cam turned on first thing. Good morning, everybody. A freshly combed set of locks. Just tested out a new brush. Needed to. It was getting a little bit ratty. So, yeah, I'm very pleased. I'm so glad you guys get to finally see what I look like now that my hair is conditioned properly. So luxurious. So we're going to get right to it and get right to the art. Today we're going to be working on the Negotiator. So this is we went so far on like all of our little videos. We've done each of the different careers in Legacy First Flight. They're not classes, mind you, because a class implies that you're stuck onto it. This isn't a fixed class system. This is an a la carte experience building system. Careers are just your starting package. So we've already worked on the soldier, who is basically the security operative, the war fighter, your rather traditional like frontline brawler. We then went to the operator, who uses guile and stealth and the same advanced weaponry that the soldier does in order to do clandestine work, but also has access to hacking modules instead of the super heavy armor that soldiers have access to called hard suits. Next we have jockeys, the insane pilots who pilot the aerospace craft and the walkers that act like the heaviest, mightiest backup a fire team can have. They're both the chauffeur and the big gun, and also the party's wall of defense, if there's a need for one. And then we talked about engineers, the incredibly skilled technicians who use their knowledge, access to science rigs and hard suits to support the fire team and to build and repair and solve practical problems in the field. We then went from the engineer to the researcher, these folks who stand on the bleeding edge of science and technology, for whom history and their scholarly knowledge allows them to solve the abstract and master the new. And today we're going to be working on the Negotiator. So, as always, I just use the template of the last one because I don't like work, and, you know, this is an easy way to do it. So we're just going to go through here, delete all these, And we're on the glow layer here. We're gonna just, we're gonna delete the glow layer entirely. I can add that back on later. And we have our block, which I'm just gonna very quickly grab here. And mute. Please be quiet, says I. Okay, thank you. Alright. So, before we begin any of these drawing sessions, what we usually do is we'll take a moment and we'll work out what species we're going to be drawing today. This is using the exact same method I've used before, which is a D8, and also our little choose your own adventure list here. I'm going to turn off my webcam so I don't get in the way of it. There we are. And I'm going to reach over here and grab my dice bag. Got it? I got it! Alright. So, there are 8 species that are playable in Legacy First Flight. They are the 8 sapient species of the Union. I do not believe in non-playable sapient species. I believe that invites a lot of bad stereotypes and negative energy into the game. And I like people to be able to empathize with a species I say is self-aware. So, you can play as any one of them. So I've got here a chance cube. Or in this case, a chance... what? Rhombus? Diamond? What geometric shape is this one again? The 8-sided 3-dimensional object? I can't remember what that is called. It's not a prism. I'll remember it later. Anyway, this little guy. This is a D8. And for each of our different species, a number corresponds. So far, we have done, and I'm going to go through the list here of every species we've done one of. We've done a human as a soldier. We've done an Anazali as the operative. We've done a synthetic as the researcher. We've done a sylph as the jockey. And we've done an Oraname as the engineer. This leaves us with 3 species left that we have not done so far. The Acris, the Click, and the Shrike. These are our 3 options. I will roll the dice until we get one of these 3. So we're looking for a 1, a 6, or an 8. And I will pop my camera back in, because at this point, I love the sylph. However, at the same time, we've just established they can't be rolled. So, dice box, dice. I have not altered it in any way. I have, in fact, only rolled it. So, let's pop this over. Still, hand is not inside the box. And like clockwork, we get our result. Again, not moving it, not changing anything about it, just positioning it so you can see it more effectively. That, my friends, is an 8. Let me get close enough for you to actually see it. That's an 8! Woo! So we got ourselves a Shrike today. The Shrike are a fun species. I don't think I've ever drawn a Shrike Negotiator, but I'm excited to. I really should. They're very fun. Actually, I guess I have drawn one Shrike Negotiator before. We can dust off his design. It's been a hot minute. So, without further ado, I'm just going to have a little sip. Don't forget, folks, you need to have your breakfast, have your drinks, have your food, do whatever you need to. If it's an early time zone for you right now, take a moment to enjoy yourself. If it's lunchtime or dinner time where you are, take a minute to enjoy yourself. Please. So, I'm going to read a description of the Negotiator at the moment, while we pop in and work on getting ourselves a couple references and getting some things started. As I'm also going to pop over and grab the art for you guys, so we have a little reference for you all to see while we do our reading. So, as I pop on into the core rulebook, 59 seconds, it's the best I can do. Oh, shit. Well, 58, 57, 56, Google, come on, load. 54, 53, 52, 51, and I don't need you to wait anymore. Thank you for your patience. So, our friend over here, the Negotiator. This is an Acris Negotiator, one of the first drawings I did of them once I finished making the career, or at least finalizing the concept for it. So, Negotiators. Despite their highly romanticized careers and vastly valuable skills, Voyagers often run into trouble that requires a lighter touch. This is the purview of Negotiators. Trained in negotiator colleges and mediator colleges, these voyagers undergo years of training in the arts of persuasion, diplomacy, and manipulation, giving them all sorts of tools to disarm dangerous situations. With experience as hostage negotiators, contract lawyers, and merchants, negotiators end firefights with a timely called ceasefire, or compelling surrender or capitulation from adversaries through promise of reward or retribution. Gunfire often ceases when a negotiator raises their voice. And while these social skills are their primary armament, to assist them in the field, negotiators are licensed to wield advanced weaponry to defend themselves. So, what does that make our negotiator here? Our negotiator is best described as a combat diplomat. I believe that would be a very simple way of describing it. They are halfway between the people who talk you down from a fight and the ones who remind people that a fight is not an advisable course of action if you want to live. Now, negotiators actually operate with these very simple concepts. Basically, they have this method of speaking known as mediation doctrines. I'm going to show this off here. So, the mediation doctrines, my head is in the way, apparently. Let's just open the base mediation logo here. So, mediation is an Anazali concept from back in the day. The very concept of mediation comes from the Anazali Imperial era, where the species that dominated the galaxy before the modern Union needed to find a way to negotiate and work within a strange space. And so their solution was to develop means of communicating that are designed to not be misunderstood. Basically, you can't misunderstand mediation. That doesn't mean that you don't still need to learn how to speak languages and stuff, but if you have command of a language, mediation isn't about the language itself, it's about how you convey thoughts and ideas. So, mediation at its core is designed to cut through miscommunication and present people with unassailably simple concepts, arguments that are impossible to refute. Anyone who's ever heard of, like, say, logical fallacies, including things like ad Hitlerium, where it's like, oh yeah, you know, you compare someone to Hitler, that's the worst thing possible. Okay, really hard to go higher than that. That's hyperbole at its most extreme, unless you actually are. So that's kind of the same idea, is that mediation attacks the very core basics of communication by presenting a statement so sublimely simple that to deny it would be to lie to yourself. And it's not a very effective thing to do, to lie to yourself. It makes you out to be an idiot in front of others if you don't agree to it, or unless you have enough skill to deflect it. And so mediation was developed as this way for the ancient Anazali when they are first stepping into the galaxy to first make contact with people that they actually wanted to meet with. This would be the doctrine of accord. The doctrine of accord is very simple. It is built on the idea of earnest, truthful, common sense negotiation. It is finding common ground through honest discussion. And as a result, it's very powerful. It is literally built off of mutual self-interest and respect. You don't need to lie to people to get them to do things with you. You just need to be earnest enough with them and provide them with a reasonable why to do it. Give somebody the logical understanding as to why working with them makes sense. And it works pretty well for the most part. So that's the doctrine of accord. And built on good faith compromise, it worked for many millennia. But once the Anazali Imperial had overthrown the tyrant Sectori and destroyed those who had enslaved the galaxy with the help of their many allies, they were elevated to the status of the dominant force in the galaxy. And many of the different species that they had liberated nominated them as protectors and created themselves as protectorates in the vassalage of the Anazali Imperial. This led to the issue of the Imperial promising more than it could deliver. The Imperial is built off of the idea that Anazali live effectively forever. They don't age. It's almost impossible for Anazali to age. They will hit about middle age and then biologically enter a sort of permanent homeostasis. They won't grow old. And for many other species, that's an appealing thought. Living forever? I mean, you know, you'll still probably one die of an accident or unnatural cause, but, like, not having a time limit on your existence is extremely appealing. The Imperial was very willing to share its technology and wanted to ultimately elevate everyone to their status, help them conquer death. However, it took them thousands of years of trying to master their own genome and end the cycle of personal entropy that their genetic structure was built around. To put the answer at the end of the question that is the genetic structure, which is, what are you? And our genetics don't really care about what we end as. They care about how we begin and replicate. And then everything after that's kind of just sort of left unanswered. The galaxy was filled with hundreds of species in this era, and the Anazali couldn't just make all of them immortal. It takes time. It takes work. It takes a lot of effort. Good luck, buddy. Drive safe. So, doing all of this, the Anazali struggled with mastering the genetic structure of the many different species of the galaxy. New lessons needed to be learned. And so they realized in time the honest approach of, we'll make you live forever if you work with us, became a lie. Thus we enter into misdirection. The doctrine of misdirection is built around the very simple premise that sometimes you need to lie and manipulate others to achieve a desirable outcome. It doesn't mean that you're evil. A lie is not evil. A lie is simply built around the idea that, well, sometimes the truth isn't sufficient. Sometimes people need to be gently manipulated into the service of their own purposes, into their own needs. It's not a cruel thing to say that a white lie can do a lot of good. I don't need to tell every one of my kids, like the minute they're born, about, like, hey, Santa Claus might not be real. Well, that kind of cuts around it, doesn't it? It sort of isn't really helpful in that instance. It's not a lie. It's just not useful in any meaningful way. So, misdirection was built around the idea that you are working with manipulating people. You're working with misdirecting them for their own benefit. Telling someone a white lie. Saint Nick is watching, so be good. It's largely harmless. With larger things, this can be done too. Manipulating others for their benefit. The Anazali did this to entire species for generations, but eventually the species started noticing that none of them were being uplifted, none of them were being gifted immortality, and the Anazali seemed no closer to their breakthroughs than they promised thousands of years earlier. And so eventually, misdirection was insufficient. A lie works until it's revealed. And then, aggression became relevant. The doctrine of aggression is built around the very simple premise that you don't need to agree with me, you just need to submit to me. In the service of greater good, minor harm can be done. And the doctrine of aggression implies that I need to dominate your will for your benefit and mine. Doesn't need to be evil. Again, when a child reaches to put their hand on an oven, do you gently explain to them while they're putting their hand on the burner why it's not a good idea? Or do you shout at them to get your hand away from the fire and then afterward apologize because the urgency demanded it? With the collapse of the Anazali Imperial, the colleges of mediation effectively were only carried on as a spiritual process, internal structure within the Anazali Imperial used to help mediate differences between the survivors and the remaining fleet of the Anazali. Barely a few million out of a civilization that used to be trillions. And the colleges became relevant, but not quite as formal as they used to be. It took thousands of years for the Anazali to re-establish modern mediation colleges, and to do so without the interest of serving fascism or an authoritarian state, but rather mitigating harm and disaster, using skills they had built up over thousands of years. These are the mediation doctrines. These are their purpose at the end of the day, to protect and safeguard the galaxy and others from their own harm. So these are the tools used by negotiators. Aggression, misdirection, accord. They spend decades training in colleges in order to master the concepts of mediation. And so, now that we're past all that, we now get to draw a Shrike. I'm going to pull him over here so you can see this handsome boy. Look at that handsome man. He's so handsome. So, Shrike are interesting as a species. They are probably the most outwardly terrifying looking species in the Union. And I don't say that lightly. They are massive, standing between, usually on average, 9 to 11 feet. They are big. 8 on the smaller side, if we want to be really cheeky about it. But as a general rule of thumb, the Shrike are big. Very, very big. And they deserve a fair bit of respect. As far as their body plan goes, I'm going to open this up. As I think we're going to revisit our Shrike-ish poet Haken here and redraw him. So, this is a really old doodle, which, taking a moment to date this video, this used to be on my DeviantArt. I am deactivating my DeviantArt, which I have not really used for ages anyway, because today they have announced that they are using generative AI to basically create art, which they all, or not art, to create images for their users. And they've already been, like, trying to scrape the site for a long time, which is why I've uploaded nothing new. Once a company announces that they're scraping a platform for AI, especially after they've started instigating the AI, it basically means they have all your data anyway. So I just decided not to give it anything more than the old doodles I have in my sketchpad from over 20 years ago. I didn't even give it to them, they just took it. So, this is on there. And I plan on keeping this in my own personal archives. But the Shrike, as a species, are digitigrade and saurian, at least to a degree, what we would call saurian. They're not from Earth, so they don't fall under our kingdoms and phylums of nature, unfortunately. Things aren't so easy when you're in space. But, if we were to give them an equivalent, I would say saurian is as close to what you could find as an analog. Dinosaur. They stand between 8 to 10 feet tall, have 4 arms, each holding 3 digits. Relatively dexterous, but very strong. These arms are designed to help them climb and sprint. The Shrike are apex predators as a species. They grew up on their world in a manner not too dissimilar from Utah raptors, or wolves, or lions. And as a species, they became one of the largest species on their planet. And not largest in terms of, like, the largest in that era. They became the largest by hunting almost everything bigger than them to extinction, before they figured out that they need to be more careful with their environment. So now the Shrike are about the largest thing on their homeworld. They have no eyes, in case you hadn't noticed, instead possessing an echolocating melon, not unlike a dolphin or a whale. This is simply because their homeworld is incredibly hot and dusty, and as a result, with the extraordinarily harsh winds and the very hot temperatures, the moisture and maintaining eyes isn't particularly valuable. The echolocation actually often serves a more effective solution for detecting where your prey may or may not be, even during the middle of a sandstorm. Likewise, they have large scoop-like mouths. One of the few ways that they have what we would consider gender phenotypes or gender traits, quote-unquote, would be the curvature of their jaw. If it's a masculine character, usually it is an underbite, where they have their jaw sticking out like that. And if it's a more feminine Shrike, often it's a bit of an overbite, where they have the top of the jaw poking out over it. These scoop-like mouths are actually used to pull moisture from the sand back in their old days, as well as also weapons for grabbing and securing prey. They tend to run between 2 and 6 horns on their head. Varies from individual to individual. Males tend to usually have more horns, females have fewer. Females tend to be about as big as males. Their quills tend to be longer, as they have a series of quills that run off of their head. That's not hair, those are very thin quills. Think of them as like Almost kind of like echidna quills. They're just very, very long. Or like porcupine quills. They're almost hair-like. So yes, they're particularly strong. They have digitigrade legs. They're basically made so that they can sprint at very high speed and use one set of arms to stabilize themselves while the other set of arms reaches out to grab prey and pull it in. Likewise, they can also climb and defend themselves quite effectively. They also have a long, very strong crocodilian-like tail nearly, designed to give them both balance and a defensive tool. The Shrike, despite being predators, and they're technically omnivorous, but they lean significantly more predatory, they're still not monsters. They're people, at the end of the day. Your Shrike neighbor is more interested, probably, in what's going on with their local sports team, or what their upcoming interview for a job is, or what's going on in their local fair, than they are about how tasty you are. They don't eat sapient species as a general rule of thumb. Much like we, despite eating meat, don't look at each other like Lunchables. So this is the species we're going to be working with. And that means we're in a good place to get to drawing. Move all these little art references off to the side. And we're going to get right to it with a solid block of drawing. All right. Make sure this is the right type of brush. So I like the idea of drawing negotiators from, like, a downward position almost, like you're looking up at them. Negotiators often appear heroic in their stature. Those body postures are actually oftentimes a consideration for how they stand. It helps their negotiation. So we're going to take this, shrink it down. Okay, so we've got something to start with. They usually have like a sort of imperious nature. I often find that's probably the result of the Anazali training. Now, most mediation colleges in the modern era actually aren't run by the Anazali. Many of them were founded by Anazali back in the day, the few remaining master negotiators who still exist of that ancient culture that's more or less dead. But every once in a while, you find one. Most of them, however, are run by other species that have taken up the mantles of the ancient Anazali. So let's get into a basic shape here. So even the, like, weakest of Shrike tend to have a significantly more built-up physiology than most humans do. You won't find many people that are Shrike-ish that aren't at least inherently a little ripped. Sort of just comes with the territory. I like the idea of crossing their lower arms here. That seems like a fun power move. And also an easy way for me to draw a character with 4 arms. I would be lying if I didn't admit that. I can practically hear the "listen to reason" coming out of their mouth. We're going to take this, slightly change the angle, because I like the way that looks, but I don't like how big it is, so we're going to just take that and... There we go. That looks pretty good. The angle's a little better now. Gonna make the legs thicker, though. Shrike are thick. That's my general rule of thumb. If you were born Shrike, you were born ripped. When in doubt, make them thicker. Something thicker, like Vicar? If anyone here actually gets that Sweeney Todd reference, then I applaud you. I was talking yesterday with a friend about Sweeney Todd, and I was like, oh yeah, I haven't watched that in an age. I should have some fun with that. Okay, so we're just gonna sort of take that like that to about here. That'll do. Then we tend to pull it back a little more. Their lower legs are much more powerful than like some of the other species. The Sylph have these sort of like spring legs. But for the Shrike, they're way stockier. They're built like a brick shithouse. They are built heavy. And their legs are designed to stabilize them and ground them while they drag prey to ground. And then we can have the other arm coming back along here. I kind of like the idea of the other arm being almost behind the Shrike. Arm down. Again, sort of a listen to reason, an appeal to reason kind of gesture. Alright, so we've got ourselves a pretty good, like, block for what we're working on, but we're not quite there yet. So we still have to get the head. And the tail. I haven't forgotten the tail. Don't worry, kiddos. The tail will be remembered. And also we're going to expand this a little bit, too. And they have little dew claws back there, too. Okay, so that feels pretty good. Let's get the head. So Shrike-ish heads are pretty big. They're a little flatter, though, than most of ours. And this is because they're almost crocodilian in nature. So as a rule of thumb, you have the melon, which kind of pushes their brow up a little bit. Then you have the jaws. And then you're going to have a set of horns that have to come off of that. We're then going to take the horns. I like the idea of this Shrike having a particularly impressive set of horns. So we're going to go with a classical kind of like curving ram horn. They come in all sorts of varieties, shapes, and sizes, so this is not unique to them. This is just this single Shrike's like horn set. the other horn sort of coming back over here. I kind of want to curl it in a little more. There we go. And we can pull those in a little more closely. Oop, not what I wanted to do. Okay, so we've got a pretty good Shrike-ish design here. Their jaw tends to come pretty far back, and their heads tend to be a little bit longer. We're going to slightly reposition the head, though. Slightly, like, not quite shrink it, but slightly reposition it a tad. Still, I guess it is a little bit of a shrink. There we go. That feels a little more in proper proportion with their body. My general rule of thumb is that a Shrike-ish jaw, from chin to tip, roughly can reach, if they were to like put their neck straight down, would reach more or less to where their solar plexus would be. It's a long scoop-like jaw, so it's got to be a little out of proportion. They don't quite work to the same anatomy that we do. So we're going to put a tail block in here, too. So I can add that block to the back and not worry about fucking with the rest of it. Welcome back. We're just in the process of drawing a diplomat. Hey, Hickory Muffins, welcome aboard. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. I hope you're having a good day so far. So far, this Shrike is coming along pretty well. I'm happy with the silhouette for it. Like, that's actually pretty decent. Now we get to the part where I get to add a little bit of hair as well. Wait, I can draw... Shut up, Paul. Everyone say hi to Amper, 21 of my players, along with Mossy, who's in the chat, who is also one of my players. It's good to see both of you there. Thank you for the garage, like half a mile walk, so it's nice and easy to get to. Yeah, I was going to say, that was pretty quick. So, good to see you, buddy. Alright, let's add the quills now. This is just so that I can get a good idea of the silhouette. There we are. Nice. Okay. There we go. That word is hard to spell. Yeah. Alright, so we've got the quills, we've got the tail. The whole anatomy looks pretty good. Let's start getting to clothing. We're going to do our clothing block now. And sort of work off of that. So, Shrike-ish clothing. Negotiators wear all sorts of different things. Today, I'm going to sort of compromise between the sort of like Mass Effectian style, like advanced technology suits you'll see a lot of species wear, often called Atmos gear. Basically, they're equivalent of spacesuits, designed to be worn comfortably under and over clothing as needed, as well as also the more traditional Shrike-ish garb that you can see here, which is designed to be a little bit more robust and rugged, often made from hand-hammered metal. So, like, they tend to live a significantly more, like, stylized life. I would almost say in a lot of ways the Shrike bear some resemblance to a lot of East Asian cultures that maintain a healthy traditional style as part of their routine cultural habits. So you're not very often going to find, like, your average person in the UK or in Europe walking around in medieval clothing as a result of festivals or something. But for the Shrike, it's very common for people in positions of status or during festivals to wear traditional garbs. So as a result, they tend to incorporate a lot more traditionalist styling into their armor and technology. So we're going to go with that. I'm going to sort of try to square the circle on this and see where we go. So first things first, we're going to go with the legs. Leg armor is always pretty easy for me to doodle. And we're just going to do a simple, like, black block for this. Because digidegrade or not, you need thigh pads. I'm sorry, they're important. They protect your thighs. And also, you know, as someone who's played enough sports, a cod piece is always a good idea. Something to keep you from getting getting T-boned in the worst place possible. I was gonna say teabagged. This will protect you from getting teabagged. Alright, and we're just gonna put this over here. Just get some very simple shapes done. So, our Shrike here has crossed arms. So I'm just gonna doodle these out with a little more detail now. Just like a hair. So you have one hand there, one hand around the back. Vam braces are important. Again, this is simply a matter of protecting yourself while you're in space. I don't want to get thrown against a bulkhead and have my arms shatter. And whenever you're flying around in space, there's a pretty reasonable chance that you might, like, hit something or get hit. Or just your, inertia might change. Your ship might need to make a sudden turn. And you'd be up shit creek without a paddle if you don't have some sort of defense. Kind of like the idea of adapting the angular armor design that they often will utilize. That seems like a good idea. We'll do that. We'll combine those two elements. As far as shoulders go, simple armor. We'll make it a little more angular than a lot of these other ones have been. Again, sort of an owing to the cultural heritage that they come from. We have our bicep armor, bicep armor, bicep armor, bicep armor. There we go. Tail I'm not going to do too much with. I don't particularly feel it's a necessary thing. I say this as someone who knows what happens when someone's tail gets beaten up enough. Like, so one of my friends had this really adorable dog back in high school. Went by the name Bandit. Sweetest baby in the world. It's been many, many years, and Bandit's no longer with us. But, I remember that he used to wag his tail at everything. And one time, he wagged his tail so hard, because he would often walk right up to objects and just sort of against it really hard. And, Bandit actually burst blood vessels in his tail at one time. And he had to wear what we called the mace ball for a while. Because to protect his tail, they put basically a little rubber doodad on it. And it just sort of turned his tail into a mace. So wherever he would go, he would just sort of hit everybody constantly. It was really cute, actually. But yeah, unlike a dog that uncontrollably wags its tail, Shrike actually have a little more self-control, so I don't think they have to worry about that nearly as much. So now we're going to get to the under neck armor here. I kind of like the idea of the Shrike having, like, nothing on their face at the moment. I think that actually works pretty well for us. Because, again, negotiator, right? You want to see my face when I'm talking to you, so you know I'm not going to shoot you. Or at least you know if I shoot you, I would have told you so much. Poppy needs tail register as a weapon because the force hits with the wag. Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of thing you got to be careful about. Mostly for their sake, actually. Now, also, there's something missing from our negotiator's fit here. And I think if I look at the drawings I've done already of negotiators again, we're going to open this one. I tend to incorporate a lot of cloth and a lot of hard light. This is sort of an homage back to the Anazali Imperiale, the species that started the mediator colleges that train our modern-day negotiators in Legacy First Flight. They tended to use a lot of hard light in their aesthetics, just as a general rule of thumb. It's just sort of Anazali culture to dress that way. It's sort of expected. You can even see it in modern day Anazali. Light elements are often added in, and actual hard light elements are often boiled into armor even if it's not necessary. So we're gonna take Anazali elements and add it into the aesthetic of our negotiator, no matter what. Also on top of that, we would be remiss to not mention how a lot of Anazali often incorporate a lot of cloth into their gear. It's not uncommon for Anazali to wear raiments or flowing cloth. Togas aren't uncommon, as are kilts super common, and many other things. But as a general rule of thumb, flowing cloth and hard light. Easy ways to immediately identify Anazali, like, designs. So we're going to work off of that. We're also going to incorporate our Shrikesh design as well a little bit, which does incorporate, like, a very heavy skirt, usually. Kind of like a forged skirt, almost, designed to protect the legs from, like, whipping sand and extreme heat. And often one shoulder pad is common for some people, but we're going to leave the shoulder pad off on this. We have the two smaller ones, and this is a proper, like, atmosphere setup. So, you know, we're going to do that. What does this mean? Well, first off, I'm looking at the lower body here, and I realize that I actually might want to slightly rearrange everything. So we're just going to take the negotiators, move the whole thing up a little bit. We're going to get onto this lower layer with the clothing block and the normal block. I'm going to reach down here, because Shrikesh legs are thick, but also large. They're long. That's a little more like it. That's closer to the, like, anatomical scaling we should be looking for. Shrike share our physical, like, body proportions in terms of leg to torso ratio, which, by the way, if you're ever drawing a human, you should be aware of a couple of basic ratios here. Your head is roughly 1/10 your height. General rule of thumb if you're drawing accurately. If you want to stylize it, 1/8 the height of your character. Furthermore, your arms, and I will stand up so you can see this, naturally rest roughly about mid-thigh. That's where your fingers reach out to. This gets to about here, whenever you're drawing somebody. At a natural rest, your hand will just fall mid-thigh. Likewise also, your entire upper body is roughly the same length as your entire lower body. These are the basic ratios. Likewise, your arms, when fully extended from tip to tip of finger, are about your height, give or take. It's roughly about, for me, like, I'm a little shorter, usually. Like, my arms are not quite as long as I am, but that's because I'm very stretchy. But I stand at about 6 foot, and my arm span is roughly about 5'10". So, that tends to track pretty well. These are all very basic things you can do to make sure that your drawings look good. But of course, this is if you're drawing in a traditional style with more scaled anatomy. Remember, stylization is your friend, so draw however you'd like. As an example, I don't draw a perfect 10 head tall character. I tend to actually draw more of an 8 head tall character. That tends to be how I do it. So I'm a little stylized, just a hair, a smidgen. Hold on, I'm gonna have a little bit more of this delicious smoothie. Alex, good to see you, buddy. Delicious smoothie today. Oh, that turned out great. That's breakfast right there. Good to see you, pal. Hope you're doing well. So we're going to take a couple of, like, other little alterations here and just add in these details to our Shrikesh armor. Again, I want to have this to be a little closer to their design scheme. I won't pretend as though as if part of what inspired their design scheme was actually a little bit of Lord of the Rings. So I say this in the sense that I love the armor of the Uruk-hai. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that are weaponers and who are designers, and they're like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense that they would build it that way. It looks like it's really brutal pig iron and it wouldn't be effective. And I go, yes, that is the point. The Uruk-hai are not, they are master smiths of mass manufacture. And so the idea of sharp welded edges and brutalist blunt gear. It's an aesthetic choice, in the same way that I don't think it's particularly helpful for the elves to make everything rounded and delicately hammered. You don't need delicately hammered armor when you're fighting for your life. And yet it looks so damn good on them. And so that's kind of what we're going with here. Given that this is a negotiator here, our negotiators' like skill sets are probably the more valuable thing than their combat prowess. I kind of like the idea of giving them a cape. I think that would be cool. So let's give them a cape, or at least a half cape anyway. Maybe raiments to sort of flow off of the back. I kind of dig that. That looks pretty decent, I would dare say. Let's actually take that and sort of like have it curl a little bit in the wind. That way we can have the other ones sort of doing the same thing over here. There we go. So that way we can see it's on both sides. And likewise, I want to do a little bit of like a kilt almost, kind of. Coming around the back, over here. Not the whole way, though. We need a space for the tail to come through. So we'll leave a divide there. This will give our tail the ability to sort of stretch through the middle. Sort of like a penguin coattail on modern like clothing. And this will give us a nice flowing aesthetic. I love Uruk-hai armor even as an armor enthusiast. Yeah, no, 100%. You have to remember that armor is built to purpose, and for the Uruk-hai, it isn't built to be the best armor in the world. It's built to be a surprising amount of armor on a huge force. And the Shrike kind of have that same premise. For them, they rely a great deal on their physical prowess. So they'd rather weaponize themselves than protect themselves. It's kind of expected that if you get into a fight as a Shrike, you fight to win. And you should be able to win, even with disadvantages. So we're going to put this at 45 for the chest area as we work through this. Same thing for the arms. And we're going to start adding some shadow here. We have the armor there. Okay, let's start adding some detail onto this now. Once I fill in this area down here. And we can always add extra as we go. Okay, let's get to that darker detail here. So I'm going to go with a medium shade here. A little brighter than what we have here for the armor. Same thing over here. This will give us a good shape for our armor. You can start seeing where shadows are emerging. Now, the reason why Shrike-ish armor tends to look like this isn't also just because they're weaponizing themselves. It's also because how Shrike make their gear. Now, Shrike aren't just warriors. I personally have a thing against warrior cultures in science fiction, because I think warrior cultures in science fiction oftentimes are very derivative. And they often sort of just invite you to go, how are they still alive, right? Like, how did the Klingons survive to get into space if they literally can't spend more than 5 minutes in a room with each other without killing each other? So I try my best to invert that with the Shrike. The Shrike are capable of warfare, and in fact, they do view martial prowess as a very component part of their culture. In fact, actually, their lairds and their lords and lairds who rule over their houses do in fact still maintain a lot of those old martial traditions. However, and a big emphasis on this, they are still a spacefaring culture and need to accommodate a spacefaring culture. Thus, we run into the sort of like dynamic that they often have in their culture. The individual Shrike will live relatively normal lives, actually. As a general rule of thumb, like, they live pretty normal, like, existences. You and I would have a lot in common with your average, what we would consider Shrike peasant in the house class. Because for them, they just, you know, live normal lives. They go to works. They go to works. They go to work. They earn a living in the galactic economy. They have the normal rights and rules of everything else. Their layards can't dominate them culturally in the same way as other, like, medieval structures do, because for layards in the modern era, that's not how their culture works. So you have this, like, interesting little compromise on the way that their whole civilization functions. Let's see, I'm gonna have it like this. One arm over the other. That seems fair. Yeah, that can go on that end, that can go on the other end. So he's sort of leaning like this. Would it be better this way or this way? I think this way. Yeah, we'll do it like that. Okay. So we have the one arm coming forward, sort of rest over the other. There we go. So for Shrike, they actually have a pretty normal life until you get to their lairds and lords, who are basically reenacting Lord of the Rings, and I shouldn't say Lord of the Rings, they're basically constantly reenacting Game of Thrones amongst each other. Each of their houses engaged in endless games of intrigue, trying to rule over each other. And oftentimes they don't succeed. Like, the houses are pretty stable as a result of how their cultures kind of evolved. So it's just sort of like an ongoing cultural artifact now. Walk softly, carry a big stick. Very much that way, yes. Shrike-ish lairds are expected to hold their positions through force. You're not allowed to just be a figurehead. Now, that said, a lot of houses will, like, maintain figureheads out of respect, and old Shrike is powerful and dangerous in and of their own right. They don't age like we do. They kind of are almost like lobsters. The older they get, the bigger they get. The stronger they get. They don't ever reach a point where they start losing muscle mass. Very few Shrike have ever reached that age, because Shrike instead will oftentimes die of organ failure long before they die of, like, what we would consider, like, classical old age. Their muscle groups will keep growing, but their skeletal structure will eventually become fragile and almost arthritic. And then they'll suffer a catastrophic skeletal failure as they reach a certain age. Horrible way to die, but, you know, basically, it means that Shrike in their old age, often called rust bones because they have a very high iron content, so if you break open a very old Shrike, oftentimes Shrike technicians and Shrike healers will say, like, you can smell the rust on someone as they get older. So for them, like, being old is not the thing you think it is. It isn't the advantage you think it is getting into a fight with an old person as a Shrike, because that old person's probably, like, almost twice the height of a young Shrike, and ripped as hell. They're all Boomy from Avatar, basically. Every single one of them's out there pushing weights. The trick is that there's a certain point where they can't do that in a healthy manner anymore, and they might have a heart attack, or, you know, they might struggle to not break their own bones. So lairds get old, and they get strong, but they also have a certain degree of frailty to them as well. So, like, it's a give and take sort of a situation. Like, are you losing muscle mass? No, but you're not even really losing skeletal mass. It's just your skeletal mass can't keep up with how thick you are. And that's a big emphasis on that word, thick. So yeah, the Shrike are expected to hold their positions through force. If you can't hold your own in a duel at any point in your life, you shouldn't be in a position where someone can exploit you in that way. So oftentimes a lot of lairds will choose their successors, and when it's time, their successors will duel them for the post. Usually in non-lethal battles. Doesn't make much sense to choose someone to replace you, then try to murder them. Again, Shrike aren't idiots. But it is a cultural rite of passage. You are expected to fight against your superiors to rise to higher rank. So these are all considerations for the Shrike. But one of the reasons I bring all this cultural nonsense up for them is because part of their tradition is smithing metal by hand. See, Shrike have an incredible resilience to heat. Their homeworld is blazing hot. Like, on average, your average Shrike summer day sits roughly between 400 degrees Fahrenheit and 600 degrees Fahrenheit before heat index and direct sunlight is factored in. As a result, you can actually have a Shrike who literally lives at a temperature on a daily basis that bread can bake. Yeah, Trial by Stone is another great example. Oh man, Trial by Stone was so cool. I loved the, I actually really enjoyed the Dark Crystal. Very cool series. Trial by Stone? So yes, the Shrike very much have to live in these extreme conditions. This gives them a pretty strong resistance to heat. They're very durable to that. So, this also means that when it comes to smithing metal, they're actually pretty good at handling very hot metals. So Shrike-ish smiths will often, by using their incredible strength, as well as heat resistance, grab still glowing metal with their bare hands and beat it, hammer it into shape. More like sculpture with clay for humans than metalworking is for us. This means a lot of Shrike will often hand hammer their equipment. The most skilled artisans will make their own armor, literally beat it into shape with their hands, which gives them a direct control over how hard the metal is. Basically, almost all Shrike-ish steel is the equivalent of folded Japanese steel. This does mean that it does need a lot of consideration. Folded steel can actually become quite brittle if you're not careful. And so, as a result, like, for them, it's part of why they do it with their bare hands. They can actually feel the tension, feel the flexibility of the metal in their bare grip. Shrike-ish alloy, to this day, is some of the sturdiest armor in the galaxy. And we're going to just sort of give these little metal plates here. We'll get a lot of detail in the final shading passes here, and the final lighting passes as well. So just follow in while we're going along with it. It'll eventually look right. Just takes a little while to get there. It's the joke, right? You gotta trust the process. Well, we're at the process stage of the process, and it's gonna be at the process stage for quite some time. So settle in, folks. We'll be done with this within the next 30 minutes. I'm willing to put money on. That should be about right. That should be more or less the time frame we're working with here. And I'm just going to give a couple little bit more texture details under there. Where the atmosphere actually meets the armor. Looks good. And I'm going to add the details on the feet last. Feet details are, you know, we'll get there. We'll get there. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. So we're still in the clothing block layer. I'm going to swap over to this, make this a darken. And put this at 100. This is going to do a fun little thing. So because of the fact that it's on darken mode, it can't go darker than the black. So it's a great way to fill in things you've already started shading. As long as you're not shading over a lighter color that you want to preserve. If that's the case, just use the lighter feature. It does the same exact thing. Here we are, as we flesh this out. Don't worry over the details. Yeah, exactly. We'll get there in time. It takes a little bit. So next up, I'm going to do a little bit of like lighting layer here. So we have actually a shade layer. Let's do a shade layer on the skin here while we still can. I'm going to pop the quills off so we can see our Shrike bald. What's the bit from, oh god, I can't remember what it's from. Bald! SpongeBob, that's what it is. Bald! This is what our buddy looks like under here. So, okay. We're going to put this at 25% and start carving. So a Shrike's jaw is very long. I do mean very long. They have a lot more in common with, like, our crocodiles and alligators. I can feel my southern nature emerging. God, no, please. I fled Florida for this reason. No. They have a lot in common with, like, alligators and crocodiles. And so they have these very long, scoop-like mouths, both designed to pull moisture out of the soil in particularly hot months, but also, like, just as a general rule, as a weapon. They are predators. So, like, historically, they would chase after something on, we would say, all sixes, until they got within range, and then they'd stretch out with their forearms, using their lower arms to continue to run, grab onto their prey, and pull it in, and their vice-like jaw would either scissor something to death, or clamp onto it and tear through it like a beak. The Floridian just escaped. Technically, that wasn't the Floridian. This is my Floridian accent. I don't put on a transatlantic accent. It's actually the Floridian accent. The only, like, real hint of Southern is every once in a while, I might legitimately throw in a little y'all. Because the word y'all actually has a fair bit of utility to it, and I'm not going to deny it. I say this as someone who's Spanish, and speaks Spanish, and, hey, ustedes is just y'all, but with a formal drawl to it. So it's really less y'all and more y'all in the classical sense, the classical y'all. But yeah, like, that's about the only, like, real artifact, I would dare say, from my time in Florida in my language that really sticks around. In fairness, this is also because my whole family wasn't really deep south. That's actually not really a thing for us. We were actually all New Yorker prior to Florida. I'm a first-generation Floridian. So, really, technically, I'm actually I'm not even a first-generation Floridian. My whole family's Puerto Rican and New Yorker before that. They took me down there after I was born in Jersey. So, you know, you work with what you get. Okay, so we've got a pretty good shape going here. We have the melon, as again, Shrike don't have eyes. Instead, they have a large melon, which allows them to echolocate. There we are. They have one set of nostrils. And now we get the horns. And we can start really sculpting these things out. Very much like ram horns, Shrike's horns are designed to actually protect your head. It allows them to strike at things very efficiently with their skull, but also protect them from something that might want to batter them back while they're trying to eat you. You know, reasonable concern if you're a predator. It also makes them very hard to attack. The Shrike are basically walking... God, how do I describe this? They're walking horns, more or less. When you combine the quills in, which we'll put the quills back on there, which are basically all like porcupine quills. They have like that slightly, like, unlike porcupine quills that are super sharp and serrated, these have like a sharper, hardened edge. I guess hedgehog is a better comparison. Hedgehog. They have hedgehog quills. Pretty much they're almost unassailable from behind. Even when they're sleeping. What you would normally consider like easy ways to knock someone out. Strike the back of someone's head. Well, they have horns there. Prevents you from hitting them from behind. And a whole bunch of quills that'll cushion the blow. Well, you know, you could strike at the middle of their back. Well, you could, but they got a pair of arms back there that can easily reach around and throttle you. Like, you want to try to attack their lower body. Okay, they have a whipping tail back and forth. When 3 Shrikes sleep back to back, they're pretty much unassailable. It's a very unique trait they possess. Spiked collar. Yeah, pretty much. We're gonna save this, because I realize we've been doing all this work and I haven't saved in an age! Oh my god! Nightmare fuel. Okay. Speaking of quills, let's talk about quills, shall we? So Shrike's quills bear a lot of similarities to our hair. Most species in the Union have some equivalent to hair. This is actually just a very convenient, similar biological evolutionary thing. Turns out having something that protects your head against the heat, very good for a species that's bipedal. And the species that aren't bipedal don't possess that, usually. As an example, the click. They live underground. They have no need for hair. They do oftentimes have, like, almost antenna-like structures, but those are primarily as sensory organs and defensive tools. Some of them will have, like, actual scales that are almost like butterfly wings, butterfly scales, but they're designed as a defensive tool from something biting you. For the species like the Shrike, the Acris, Humanity, even the Anazali, all possess some equivalent of hair that shelters the back of their head. A useful trait for a species that needs to walk around upright. Now we're going to go in here and add a little detail, so we can sort of see a little bit where things would rest. I kind of like the way this is looking so far, so I'm not going to mess too hard with it. Usually I'll give the Shrike like a, a little bit of hair or like some kind of like cragginess to them. But their skin is a lot more like lizard skin. It's not like unbelievably hard. So far, Shrike Negotiator's coming along really nicely. I like the fact that he's got a little more Warlord in him than, like, Calm Negotiator. I'm willing to bet this Shrike probably dabbles, if we're looking at the varieties of negotiation, we're probably talking about a Shrike that tends to dabble more in the doctrines of... As I open these up again... Probably a combination of the doctrine of accord, which is about telling the truth and basically reaching people earnestly where they're at, and the doctrine of aggression, which is built around the idea of using your will to overpower others. So the first one's all about seeking consent and agreement, and the second one is about protecting you even if you don't necessarily have consent. It's very much a get your hand off of the oven, Timmy kind of energy. And I can imagine that for a species as intimidating as the Shrike, the doctrine of aggression comes very naturally. Even if they aren't themselves aggressive, it's a useful skill set to have to be able to intimidate people away from harm. Especially in the middle of an open firefight. Now, fun fact, for those of you guys who are like, oh, but, you know, they're negotiators. That's not cool. Okay. Negotiators, mechanically speaking, in Legacy have some of the coolest abilities out of the entire damn game. Negotiators are the only group in the entire game that can start combat as a surprise round while being directly in line of sight with others. So basically, normally combat begins when you draw swords and fight, and if you want to ambush somebody, you have to work around to being sneaky, and then you get an extra round. But for negotiators, they can say, well, we tried, and immediately launch into combat in a way that other species kind of can't expect. So yeah, the Peacemaker. In addition to that, negotiators also have a really cool ability, which is they have the ability to non-lethally remove people from combat. It's the exact same mechanics as I might as well have pulled out a gun and shot him, but in this instance, it's I didn't have to. I didn't want to waste the ammo on you, so I'm gonna let you go. Please leave and never return. And it works pretty well. Anyone who's ever sat down in a game at a table and felt overwhelmed by the number of enemies, all you can do is sort of like injure a couple of them a few times and it's not enough to really like make the difference. Well, you absolutely can hurt like enemies in Legacy as a negotiator, or even just watch your allies do damage, and then go up to the injured ones and be like, hey man, you really want to die here for like whatever they're paying you, or you want to go? Please go. And in the middle of combat, they'll leave. Negotiator axioms are not just gentle appeals. They're literally logical fallacies weaponized against others. It's the idea of saying, you could stay here and die, or you could leave, and presenting it as a logical argument that you would need an insane amount of cognitive dissonance to disregard, or similar training. Examples of this include one of my favorite axioms, which are these little, like, sort of pre-programmed verbal responses that any negotiator is trained to weaponize. This is where the colleges come in. Each college has its own axioms, its own axiomatic focus. But as a simple example for some of these, as I pop on over and open the field mediation, one of my favorites is this amazing one known as the gift of surrender. You walk up to someone and say, hey, you shouldn't have to die for this. Please leave. You make a negotiator roll, and you then add a bonus based on how much trauma that character's accrued. Trauma being the injury rating in Legacy. And hey, if it's high enough, they'll just fucking go. They'll be like, hey, thanks, and then that'll be it. They'll leave combat. You can theoretically run a pure pacifist run in the game. But likewise also, you can use it yourself to protect others and your party. Anyone ever face a party wipe? Well, the axiom mercy is a circle means that you can target the leader of an adversarial band of NPCs or a central character who's attacking you. Think like a boss, basically. If they have you dead or right so people are dying or dropping in your party, you can make a negotiation roll opposed by their will, and you get extra dice to it based on the number of allies with more than 2 trauma points who are currently unconscious, fighting for their life, or dead. If you succeed, combat ends immediately, they treat your wounds, and they put you somewhere safe. Because the simple truth is, on the frontier, you never know if you'll be the one who needs that luck next. So mercy is a circle, and it is a very powerful weapon. This is how I've done my best to try to make negotiators more than just the bard. As much as the bard can be fun, who doesn't enjoy themselves a good horny dragon fucker? The bard's basically just a wizard that sings or plays the lute, usually. And they don't really have much focus given over to their negotiation abilities. Even though that's kind of their whole shtick, is that a bard is a communicator. And I kind of just love that. I love the fact that I can have a character in Legacy that absolutely will just try to save lives. Let's add some extra details here. We're going to integrate some little, like, glowy bits into here. I feel like that's appropriate. Going to go into our shade layer here. We're going to add a little more. Just in time for my eye to start freaking out. What the hell? Eye. Cut it out. I don't like that very much. That was a bad pun, and my eye let me know that. Get out of here. I think I have an eyelash in my eye. Hold on. There we go. Think we got it. I think we got it, chat. We did it. Okay, so now we're going to add a little more detail here to the inner arms. This area under here where the armor sort of joins. We also need to decide where our lighting is coming from. So I'm going to turn on our sun here. Hello, Mr. Sun. We're going to move him to where the light is facing. Mr. Sun, I think you're better served on the other side of our tablet here, so whoop. Sun's coming from that direction. That works. We could work with that. I saw what you did in Boo You. Thank you. Alright, so we have our light source coming from the top right of the panel, which means our friend here is facing into the sun. We can work with that now. So, now that we know the direction that light is coming from, everything facing away can be made darker, just by a hair. We can do that here as well. Nice. Okay, then we get into here, darken this area. Always curve the groin plate, because I'm just saying that's actually a little more comfortable. Everything the light touches. Don't make him look directly at the sun. He'll hurt his precious eyes. He has no eyes. He's Shrike. He's got a melon. There's no eyes here. There's no eyes. There's a brow, because the melon can still get hit by objects, and having a brow is actually an actively useful tool. But Our boy good. He can stare in the sun as much as he likes. He'll probably just be like, oh, it's warm. And that's about all he'd get out of it, though. Probably because it's just him looking at the sun. You're right. You're totally right. It's what he gets. He's staring into the sun too much. The fall of most Shrike-ish dynasties. They stared at the sun too long. Got hot. Come on, sinuses. Work with me here. Okay, we can turn the light away here. Do the same thing on this side. Nice. Okay. So our armor is catching some definition now. Feels good. Let's go further. We can push this significantly further. I want to add a little bit more in terms of the horns. So let's add some details. I tend to like these like ram horns in terms of shape. It adds a little more definition to how they look and how they move. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit more here as well. We're going to take a little bit on this shading side here. And I'm just going to add a little bit more to the side of the face. There we go. We're going to add a little bit more to the underside of the neck. Really sculpt out those shapes. And then the next part we're going to be doing here, as I zoom out, is work on... Oh, hold on. I almost forgot something. I almost forgot something very important. When facing away from the sun, cloth too will gather shadow. So here we go. We're going to sort of get the shading there as best as we can. We'll fix up what we don't do right on the light layer. What matters is we're trying our best here. And also we're going to do the same thing for the tail. This big, long crocodile tail that they have. Beautiful. We also have the hands, but we'll do the hands last. I'm not particularly worried about the hands. Honestly, half the time I kind of just futz with the hands and call it a day. Let's get to our lighting layer now. So this is where all the light touches, as we referenced earlier. So we're going to put this at 45 and start with that. Alex, I know since you're a miniature painter, you'll recognize this technique. Edge highlighting. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful how skills transfer? It's amazing how you can create the illusion of shape with just a little bit of a line on the outside. Alright, looking good. Let's see, not a negotiator question, but a Shrike one. Does their sight get better or worse depending on the environment they're in? Yes, they do have environmental considerations, much like other species. But for them, it has more to do with, like, noise, like, noise pollution in the atmosphere. More than anything else, the louder an environment is, the harder it is for them to focus on individual things. Likewise, also, they can suffer from, like, being overwhelmed by loud noises and stuff. Basically, much like a whale subjected to depth charges, large explosions and things of that nature can be very troublesome for a Shrike. So, you're very much better at 2D than I am. Hey, it's practice, homie. It's all practice. But yeah, Shrike do have, like, considerations. They do have lighting condition thoughts. But it is just sort of like their lighting conditions are just atmospheric conditions. And I'm just going to sort of put that curve there so you can see like where those end. I'll usually do this explicitly for armor, because the white looks a little more metallic when it's reflecting off of stuff. There we are. Can they at least sense if it's night or day? Absolutely. So yeah, this is an interesting little detail, and it's something I worked out very early on when I was working with the Shrike. The Shrike can, through their sonar, perceive something approximating light and color. Now this is simple, and it actually works out pretty easy when you take a couple seconds to think about it. So most objects actually vibrate, like as a baseline. Your molecules vibrate in a certain way. That's how light works. Light is how light reflects and vibrates off you, based on the subatomic frequencies of light that refract off basically your really tiny subatomic structures. Your chemical shape refracts light in a certain way, in the same way that a substance refracts sound in a certain way. So if I'm in a metal room and I hit a pan together, it'll make a significantly louder clang than if I were to be in, say, a stone hallway, which would have a long echoing sound. That would probably slightly dampen the shockiest part of the sound. Whereas if I'm surrounded by foam, it might mute the sound almost entirely. And so for the Shrike, they can actually perceive color and light in the same way. It creates vibrations in the particles that it interacts with, and their sonar, at incredibly close ranges, can actually sense those changes in texture and those changes in chemical composition. It allows them to perceive something akin to light, akin to color, to the point where Shrike actually do have house colors. But their colors are really more the materials that their armor is often made out of. For everyone else, they go, oh, you know, house score, they're the red house. And for the Shrike, they're like, oh, I guess, technically. We always thought it was the Ferris house, but sure, we'll work with that. Like, and that tends to be how that works. So for them, they perceive light and sound and color that way. And if we're talking about the sun, something that's so far away you can't really sense it by sonar, what you can sense is the heat. They have the ability to perceive light primarily as a combination of heat and vibration. So as long as they can feel the heat, they're good. Plus also their armor and technology, even though they can't see, they do have armor technology that often incorporates cameras and the like, and translates that optical data into sonic data that they can absorb, in the same way that we use sonar systems that translate sound into optical data. So yeah, long and short, the Shrike absolutely can see and perceive light. It's just in a vastly different way than we do. And there we go. We're just going to have these little blades coming off on the top here. Nice. Yeah, thank you. I think it's turning out pretty decently. A little weird on that angle, but we're good. Okay, so our boy's armor's looking pretty decent. We're going to catch these parts here. I suspect we're probably not going to be able to finish the whole thing, but we will get the very most, like, at very least, the bulk of the design down. By the time you're done, the only thing you'll be wondering about is very specific details. I'll be doing cleanups off of stream here. Here we go. But we're getting to that point where, like, I'm pretty comfortable with how this is turning out. I'm kind of digging it. One of the best parts of being trained as an artist as I am is that I was trained as a portrait artist. So I have to paint people, or in this case, use pastels, to draw people who, for the most part, didn't want to be there. Try imagining going to, let's say, like, Disney World, right? Let's say someone goes to Disney World. And then they look at a portrait place and they're like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. And I tell them, it's going to take me 45 minutes to an hour. At Disney, a place you paid to get into. A place filled with wondrous rides and foods and stuff you'd rather do. If you're talking about Disney and actually feel that way. I'm a Floridian, so my thoughts on Disney are significantly more complicated than yours as a tourist. But my point still stands. You might not be so keen on getting a drawing done of you. So we were trained to go fast. The technical time you should have for a black and white portrait should be roughly about 5 to 15 minutes at peak, and 15 minutes is really slow. You should be going way faster than that if you want to make commission as an artist working where I was working. So, you go quicker. You learn to go quicker. We're going to sort of get the underside of this so you can sort of see the shapes. Cool, that works. And we can sort of see that going underneath there. Now you can get the armor plating here on the chest. Really sort of catch those edges here. And then over here on this side, we're going to get the whole shoulder, that whole bicep plate. And now we're going to get the actual shoulder armor. Likewise, we're also going to sort of take this plate down here. There we go. Now we got some good angles on that. Feels pretty good. We're going to do the same thing with this vambrace here. Beautiful. Now, a lot of Shrike will often wear, like, bladed knuckles, oftentimes on their armor, but this is a negotiator, so I imagine even though they're keeping the old sharpened aesthetic of their Shrike armor and heritage intact, it wouldn't behoove them to do so. I suspect they're probably, like, trying to make it look a little less intimidating than it could be. They're already a big guy, like... There's a value in looking like a big scary person when negotiating, but at the same time, if you want to do anything but scream at someone how they're going to die and they should run away, it probably behooves you to look like the sort of person you can have a conversation with. So this Shrike's armor tends a little more towards heroic rather than intimidating. And yes, I use the word heroic because they would in this instance. So we're going to get into the shade layer here. We're going to add a little detail onto this. We're going to make this at 75%. We're just going to go ham on it. We're going to really go nuts. And do the same thing on this end. And then we're going to go into the upper light layer. I'm going to call this the glow layer again. Here we go. And we're going to just absolutely punch the crud out of this light. So I tend to put light sources in things because it's very fun. And again, this is a way for us to attach this to the Anazali heritage of negotiation. And we're going to include that. I was thinking ceremonial so heroic works as well. Yeah, that's very true. It's definitely a cultural artifact that this Shrike chose to preserve. Even as they've incorporated other cultural artifacts into it as well. I actually think we'll do like an angular, triangular thing. So, fun fact, again, because Shrike use sonar, they often play a lot more with shape than things. To other species, they might see a structure as brutalist, but for the Shrike, it's not brutalist. Instead, it allows them to perceive things a little differently. Hold on, we're on the glow layer here. I'm going to take this off. X. We're going to put this in the shade layer. There we go. And we're going to go onto the light layer here. We're going to erase this little bit. And we're going to hit this edge where the light would hit it. So they will often put grooves and things in their armor or their buildings, specifically because they'll sound nice when they're observed. So stuff like that is definitely a way to keep their culture alive and well. So I kind of like that. We'll get back into the glow layer here and have like a glowing star heart come out of here. So star hearts are an Anazali thing. They're actually little reactors, but which is why their armor glows. But for like their actual culture, like for your day-to-day, most Anazali don't wear like active star hearts that are basically little reactors anymore. They used to back in the peak of their culture. Nowadays they kind of just wear the aesthetic of it. It's sort of stuck. So let's get a little bit more brightness going here. I want to see where the light falls. As we sort of catch our silhouette here, and really sort of brighten up the places where this Shrike's armor faces the sun. We're going to get around that curve there, sort of play around with it a little bit. Beautiful. And we'll also give a little focus on the blade here, which facing the sun would have a slightly sharper edge. Same thing with that area right there. Basically, if I was to give you a comparison from Mass Effect to where the Shrike are from, culturally, like what their DNA is, I'd say your best comparison would probably be like if the Krogan actually learned how to adapt to galactic culture. That's kind of a little closer to what you're dealing with here. They are potentially capable of warfare. They do so very frequently, but they're not solely comprised of it. And their culture learned to use their weaponization of their body and their nature to their advantage. They had to learn how to do that. If they didn't, they wouldn't have survived this long. We're going to just sort of put that into there. Beautiful. And I'm going to have a little bit more of this side facing it as well. Let's reduce that even further to 15%. Shouldn't be as bright as that. There we go. Nice. Really goes from blocks to oh shit. It really does, doesn't it? It's kind of the fun part of drawing stuff like this. Before you know it, you add a couple of details, and the lighting really kicks it in, and it goes from just like general shape to, oh hey, that's a thing. That's an actual thing there, with thing-like qualities. And we're going to have just the edge of this one lit up, where the light's reflecting off of it. Same thing here. Now, this is almost all facing down, so we're not going to put too much light there. Same thing here. A little more light on this side, actually, because that is facing the sun. But only a little bit, because the back of the leg would be the bright part. Because the other leg is occluding this one. Then we get the top of this leg here, which is still mostly facing the dark, but we've already added extra darkness to that, so it should read properly. And then we just sort of catch this. There we go. And just like that, we managed to make our shapes look pretty decent. I'm going to have this side sort of facing a little more the light. Same thing on this one. Beautiful. Our boy's looking pretty decent, dare I say. But we're not done quite yet. There's still some parts we gotta manage. So we're going to go to 15 again. Sort of catch this. Catch the top of that. I tend to use, again, like, increments of 10 to 15% to convey most of what I'm doing. I'm going to probably drop this down to a 5, and you'll see why. So this is a curved surface, which means I can't actually do, like, super hard divides of lighting. So my best bet is to slowly build up to it until it's as bright as it needs to be. There you go. Now we have a curve. Likewise, I'm going to put this at 10% here, because this isn't facing the sun directly, but it is going to be brighter than the just, like, bare back of this. We're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to do the same thing here. Now we get to do the actual clothing, which is going to be fun. Oh, I almost forgot. We have these guys down here. These are armor plates. They need to be considered. And I should probably also add some shape and texture to these fingers, so they read as fingers and not just blobs. There we go. Looks a little better now. Do the same thing here. And where the light hits it more directly, we'll let that be lit up a little more. And where it isn't, we're just going to let it stay completely dark. There's no need to really add extra light to something that isn't going to be that visible. And this is going to be the brightest part of the armor because it is literally a flat plate facing the sun. Not bad. Not bad at all, dare I say, my friends. So we're just going to get the face and the actual cloth here, and then I'm probably going to call it for today's stream. We've been going for about 2 hours, which is pretty good. And I'm really appreciative of everyone who tuned in, as always. We're going to sort of have this follow the curve of the cloth. And we're going to have this sort of fall around the outside. Doing cloth work is some of the most fun to draw if you're sketching. If you're trying to do hard lines, oh god, it's so miserable. Loving seeing this new wave of careers art. Why, thank you, I appreciate it. It's been very fun to draw. I might go back and redraw the soldier one last time and see how I feel about it, but I kind of like the way it looks right now. I just think I would revisit the face if I had to revisit anything. There we go. Okay, and then over here we have that cloth sort of coming through. Same thing back here. There we go. We're going to add a little bit of detail to the backs of the tail along here. Because again, crocodilian, it's vaguely shaped. And I'm just going to hit the top of the tail here with a very bright light to sort of denote that it is taking the brightest possible light wherever it goes. at its point, at its apex. And I see that that hand has kind of gone really, like, not that great. So we're going to go to the shade layer here. We're going to go down here onto this. We're going to make that black. Make that 75%. And we're just going to change the shape a little bit of it. Have it sort of hanging out behind the thigh. And then we can go back in on our light layer here, hit this at like 25%, and we can get ourselves a little bit of like shape for how the hand looks. And your eyes will fill in the rest. I don't need to do all that work anymore. Nice. I don't even need to do that much work. That's like too much. There we go. You do the same thing here because it's so bright. Beautiful. And just like that, a little bit of work pays off. There we go. Let's get ourselves on the light layer up here. We're going to do a little bit of detail work on our Shrike's face, because we should. The areas where it's brightest, I tend to put a little bit of light. He deserves it. Our boy deserves a literal glow up. Put a little bit right there on the top of the snoot. Pull that back. Yeah, I really am glad you guys have been enjoying this. It's been a really fun series to do. I'm sure I'm going to do more stuff for Legacy like this. Especially as I continue to do more work on the actual book. But all this was originally because I wanted Legacy to have hand-drawn art, and I don't like the idea of, like... Some things I want to be my drawings, no matter what, in Legacy. They're built off of my art, they're built off of my ideas, and I'm not the sort of person that's afraid to surrender control, but at the same time, it's one of those, I really want this to stand out. I really want this to have a unified vision. There's only so many species in Legacy. Every species is unique and rare and has its own culture. And it's not like Star Wars or Star Trek where there's a million face-putty aliens that just kind of exist. And no shame to Star Trek or Star Wars. That's the type of genre they exist in. Legacy is, again, more Mass Effectian in the sense that the different cultures are relatively relevant in Legacy First Flight. So I wanted to make sure those were properly represented. We're going to have the other one there. Now we can get the quills. The quills are going to be fun. Watch this. Just like a couple of drawn hair-like structures. And we've got ourselves some pretty good quills. Just like right out of the rip. Oftentimes I'll play around with human-like hairstyles for Shrike-ish quills, because it's really fun to do so. I have one Shrike who has like an actual mullet of quills, and it's just really fun to do. Likewise, this little guy has a goatee. And we're going to go on here with like a 10%, and we're just going to start picking out the areas where the light is brightest. There we are, and then the top of the forehead there. You get sort of the cheekbones that come down. Nice. That feels pretty good. And I'm just going to sharpen this one here a little bit more. Just so that it stands out a little more against the quills. we'll do the same thing on the other side. Nice. We're also going to sort of texture these, because these are like teeth. These little grooves here actually do have an angle to them. They can grip. So it's important for us to convey that effectively. Yeah. I feel pretty damn good with that. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I introduce you to the Shrikesh Negotiator. Give it a little splash on the back. Let's pull that down a tad just to make it a little bit more aesthetically appealing. I can re-angle that a little bit more. Hold on. Whip. There we go. Shrink it a tad. There we go. And let's actually flip this. Hold on. Transform. Rotate left. Actually, that looks pretty sick. So yeah. We have ourselves the Shrikesh Negotiator. I feel pretty good about this, folks. Mildly disappointed no click? That's true. There'll be more click in the future. I'm intending to do one for each of the different species as well. I already started that off a while back. I'm going to take a little moment to show you. We actually already got the Acris drawn. And I intend to go through and finishing the other species off. So we actually have the Anazali, which we started doodling. Not quite happy with the way that turned out, but I'm going to continue to work on it. And my goal is to have a bit of art for each species, and a bit of art for each career moving forward. So yeah, I'm super excited. Folks, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you all. I hope you all have a lovely day. Remember, you can draw anything. Take care out there. Thank you to my patrons again. Tier 1, Ampersand Atlas and JJ Cray. Tier 2, Necronomus and Souls Rolls. And Tier 3, Mossy the Mighty and Heinrich the Heroic. You guys are all incredible. Anyone who wants their names read or wants producer credits in Legacy First Flight or in my webcomic, Gentry Dawn Ain't No Fascist, go to patreon.com/TheLastDomDetect and throw me a little money. I'm a poor guy, I don't make much money. This channel isn't even, like, affiliate yet, so I don't even make money from YouTube. So anything you can do to help would be appreciated. Likewise, feel free to go and hit that like button, assault the subscribe button, defenestrate the comments, do whatever you need to do to help our tiny little channel grow. Take care, and I'll see you out there, Voyagers. Peace.